Greetings, Magic the Gatherers. I wanted to give you guys an update as I have reached Mythic with my last deck, and as I understand it, that is important in your evaluation of said decks. I'm going to put the win rates here up on the screen, as well as an approximation of my climb to Mythic. I say approximation as I partook in some ranked event matches, and my untapped companion failed me a little bit. So I'm going to talk about the deck, what makes it work, how the pieces all interact. Yeah, it's Golgari mashed with Orzhov, but there are quite a few interactions and pieces that make this work as well as it does. I will leave a link to the gameplay video in the description, as well as a link to the deck list as well. And I'm going to keep this brief on the cards that we already know, unless there's ways that it specifically interacts with the deck. But I do also really want to touch down on some of the lesser known cards, like Teachings of the Kirin. Blossoming Tortoise is a newer card. Old Rutstein doesn't see much play, but does fantastic work here. So starting off with Duress, this is our 1 in 60 chance to make the opponent concede on the first turn. But more importantly, it serves a critical function in this deck. What makes a deck really good in this sort of aggro meta is having a curve that is as low as possible. If you're ever building an aggro deck, you need the 1-drops. If you ever want to answer them, you need the 1-drops. Or at least something to fill out the curve, because there's an issue when you decide to start your curve at 2, which is sometimes you really need the tempo of playing a 2-drop and something else. You can't just curve into your 3, or you don't have it. These little things are good to have in your deck because they round out the curve. March of Wretched Sorrow is a powerful card. I don't see it much. It is X and a black, instant. As an additional cost, you may exile any number of black cards from your hand. The spell costs 2 less to cast for each card exiled this way, and it deals X damage to target creature or planeswalker, and you gain X life. That's great in the early games against the aggro decks, because you can play this for 1 black and pitch something that is either detrimental in the match or you're not going to get to. So you can pitch your Kaya, because you're not really counting on making it to 7 lands in those matchups. You can pitch Phyrexian Arena is a very good one to pitch, because you often can't be greedy enough to just play this against mono red, because it burns away your life, and the card draw doesn't quite counteract that. But you can pitch it to March of Wretched Sorrow, which instead allows you to, it helps you remove something and stall the game by gaining life. Very, very good card. And of course, late game, you can kill big creatures, big planeswalkers, all while balancing your life total back enormously, which will swing the game. I know what you're thinking. Where are all the cut downs? I don't like them. They feel dead more often than not. And I want to run Virtue of Persistence, even though it suffers from the same problem. At least it can kill the 3/3s. There's too many big creatures, decks that just don't have the targets for it. And what's really important is being able to minimize the number of dead cards in your hand. So for that reason, I have forgone the cut downs. First, I want to talk about Teachings of the Kirin. This is our second card that really doesn't get much play. This is 1 in a green, Saga. Mill 3 cards, create a 1/1 colorless spirit creature token. The next chapter, you put a 1/1 counter on a target creature you control. Now you have a 2/2. Chapter 3, exile it, you transform it. You can get Kirin Touched Orochi. That is another 1/1, but it's got some abilities. Whenever it attacks, you can exile target creature card from a graveyard. When you do, create a 1/1 colorless spirit token. Or you can exile target non-creature card from a graveyard. When you do, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. So for 1 in a green, you can have 2 2/2s, or you can have a 2/2 and 2 1/1s. This makes it feel a lot like a 2-mana wedding announcement, and it it's a deadly curve into Wedding Announcement. I don't know how this card flew under the radar for so long. It's very good against surviving until the longer game. One thing I realized about this card against the mono red matchups, aggro decks that really try to tap out with everything to kill you as fast as they possibly can, is they often have no blockers open because they're swinging with everything. Which means with the Kirin Touch Orochi, you can swing in, create a creature token. Creature decks, you're gonna find creatures in their graveyard, and then you use that token to chump block without losing your Kirin Touched Orochi. This allows you to just keep generating chump blockers turn after turn after turn, which is part of what makes Wedding Announcement good. And then as soon as you stabilize, you can put counters on it, or your Anthem kicks in, and now you just have just all of these big creatures. We have our Terra Sunder. It's seeing some more use now, but it's 1 in a green. Exile target artifact or enchantment. If its spell is kicked for an additional 1 in a black, exile target non-land permanent instead. Be aware this does not hit man lands, but it's just about everything else. It's very good against the Kumano Faces Kakazan. That's a good card to use this on. You don't want too many. Always sucks to run into, let's say, mono white or mono red when they don't have any enchantments, and then it's a dead card, and that's not good. You can't really afford to wait until turn 4. It's a nice little single slot here. You know your Wedding Announcement, pump out tokens, turns into an Anthem. It can draw you cards, which actually kind of makes it like a white Phyrexian Arena. Not bad. Lord Skitter, I compare this card to Wedding Announcement because it pumps out creatures every turn, but it also comes with more power, just as the Anthem does. As a 3/3, unlike the Wedding Announcement, even though the rats can't block, Lord Skitter himself can make your opponent hesitate to attack. Your opponent can ram their Monastery Swift Spear into your human tokens all day. But if there's a 3/3 on the battlefield, they might hesitate to swing to begin with. It's very important to have creatures that can hold off multiple creatures. He also serves as repeatable graveyard hate, and the cool thing is he just continually pumps out rat tokens nonstop. And he plays with the Wedding Announcement. He's a creature token generator that can stall the game while the Wedding Announcement ticks up and creates creatures or draws you cards, and then all of those tokens that you've accumulated between them both get pumped, which is a big deal. And by not running a full playset of him, we don't run into the mono black issue of, now my black Wedding Announcement is, I can't put them down turn after turn, which is another thing that makes Wedding Announcement so good. Phyrexian Arena, it's starting to see more play, but understandably against the mono red decks, you can't really afford to burn yourself turn after turn. So again, you can pitch it to your March, but just a 2 here, just 2 here, because the biggest problem with this, in addition to your life being a fragile resource, is that it doesn't stop your opponent from swinging in. So that first card's going to cost you a lot more than 1 life. On the other hand, Glissa Sunslayer. I have been looking at the Golgari deck, and it hit me. Glissa, what she actually is she's a sneaky 3rd and 4th copy of Phyrexian Arena. The split here is very nice as well. Her being a legendary creature, you can't put more than 1, but you could have her and a Phyrexian Arena if you so chose. You also get to choose whether or not you want to draw. Just like Lord Skitter, she holds back attackers. As soon as mono red has run out all their burn spells, she stops everything except for the Phoenix chicks, which makes her very powerful. She can destroy enchantments. You can counter as destroying creatures if the opponent is forced to block, and she can attack planeswalkers, questing beast style. You swing her at the opponent, they take 3, and then you remove 3 from their planeswalker. Very nice value. Now, there are some targets in your own deck here that you can use to get a little creative with this ability. Teachings of the Kirin. You can remove counters from it every turn to pump something every turn. I think you can even remove all of them to create spirit tokens every turn. Similarly, with the wedding announcement, if you keep the last counter from being put on it, it stays on the first side indefinitely, pumping out a creature or drawing you a card every turn. These are possible plays you can do with her. Old Rutstein, another one of, and like Duress in March of Wretched Sorrow, he allows you to round out your curve with these blood tokens. In case you don't know, 1 in a black and a green, 1/4 legendary. When he enters the battlefield and at the beginning of your upkeep, you mill a card. If it's a land, you get a treasure, mana for mana. If it's a creature, you get an insect token, creature for creature, making him also yet another token generator. They're all tokens. I meant creature tokens. And if it's non-creature, non-land, you get a blood token, which you can use to spend your little straggling 1 mana on, and to pitch dead cards. If your Sunfall isn't going to cut it, if they're running artifact creatures and your Go for the Throats aren't going to hit nothing, you pitch it to the blood token. I have had this guy, I've been able to play a Kaya, Intangible Slayer, 7 mana card on turn 4 because of this. What happened was he had milled the Kaya, and then he had milled land, and then I had Invasion of Tovada in my hand, and turn 4, here we go, Kaya, and you can bet your butt I won that game. We have the Wandering Emperor, token generator, and doles out +1/+1 counters, and can gain you life with her -2. I want to talk about, real quick, the +1/+1 counters. There's not a whole lot of cards in here that can spread them around, but if you put just one of them on your Sheoldred, you don't have to worry about your opponent removing it with a Nahiri's Warcrafting, something that deals 5 life. It takes a bad situation for them and puts a nail in the coffin. I like it a lot. Blossoming Tortoise, another new card. I see it starting to get picked up. I was very skeptical on this card when it first came out. It's 2 and 2 green for a 3/3 turtle. When it enters the battlefield or attacks, you mill 3 cards, then return a land card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. A quick interjection, Teachings of the Kirin over here and Old Rutstein can actually work with this by giving you a few extra chances to have a land in your graveyard to make sure that this guy is a little less likely to whiff. Activated abilities of lands you control cost 1 less to activate. That means as soon as you hit 8 lands, you can start swinging in with 2 of your man lands. At 7 mana, you can do a man land and a Mirrex. And at 6 mana, you can pump out 2 Mites from the Mirrex every turn. It gives land creatures +1/+1. That turns your Restless Cottage into a 4/4. Now let me tell you why this turtle is so strong. First turn, he mills a card. Sometimes that is the Restless Cottage. You untap. You are now swinging in with a 3/3 and a 5/5 that exiles a card from a graveyard and creates a food token. What's more is if you happen to hit your land drop as well, you can crack that food token right away. You have 2 mana open. If you don't want to do that, go for the throw. It opens up your options while putting so much pressure on your opponent. And then, all while ramping you again. It also ramps you straight into your 7 drops, your Kaya, your Virtue of Persistence, your Farewell. If you get this on the battlefield, and especially if you attack with it, any of these, you don't have to worry about casting these. It fixes your mana. Oh, you're missing your 2nd white mana? Boop, boop, boop. You just pull something out of your graveyard. I have come to understand why this turtle is a mythic, and it is very deservedly so. Do not be fooled. This is an excellent card. We have our Sunfall. It's the exile board wipe. It is another way to create tokens. which is about to be very important, as I will tell you in a second. Then we have Shieldred, the OG Shieldred. 3 and 2 black. You get a legendary 4/5 with Menace, so that synergizes with you removing creatures. For 4 and a black, you exile her and you return her transformed, only if the opponent has 8 or more cards in their graveyard. Then, on the flip side, we have the True Scriptures. For each opponent, destroy up to 1 target creature or planeswalker that player controls. So when she enters, you get an Edict. When she flips, you get it's a murder, right? Next chapter, each opponent discards 3 cards, then mills 3 cards. Usually that's enough to totally put someone out of the game, but if they're stubborn, you get to chapter 3. Put all creature cards from all graveyards onto the battlefield under your control. Then you exile it and you bring her back front face up. There's already so many cards, you don't have to worry about your opponent playing good creatures to hit good creatures with her. Be aware though, this is very important. In this deck, she is a skill check, and what I mean by that is you have so many cards in here that exile. You have your Terrace Thunder, you have your Graveyard Hate, your Lord Skitter, Sewer King. These are more important. You have your Teachings is Graveyard Hate. Your Restless Cottage exiles cards from the graveyard. If you get too crazy with removing cards from your opponent's graveyard, you might draw into Shieldred and never be able to flip her. So you need to find a good balance. What you can afford to allow them to keep in your graveyard. Things that maybe you'll get back with Virtue of Persistence. They work well together, but only as long as you're smart about it. You don't want to find yourself stuck with your opponent having only 6 cards in their graveyard. You want to flip her and end the game. Invasion of Tolvada. This is a 3 and a white and a black for a siege with 5 defense counters. When it enters the battlefield, return any non-battle permanent card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Like I said, you can get Kaya or one of the virtues out for cheap if you're lucky, but it does happen. Otherwise, we have all of these powerful 4-drops. We have these powerful 4-drops. We have our Shieldred, and we've got a whole bunch of pretty decent 3-drops. When you get all of the defense counters off of it, you get the Broken Sky, which is an enchantment that says creature tokens you control get +1/+0 and have lifelink. And at the beginning of your upkeep, create a 1/1 white and black spirit creature token with flying. Be aware, it's actually a 2/1 because it's affected by the anthem. Let me remind you how many token generators there are on the deck. You got Revelry, Teachings, Wedding Announcement, Skitter, Old Rutstein, Wandering Emperor. The Blossoming Tortoise could get you Myrixes in addition to the Myrixes themselves. Sunfall, big tokens. There are a lot of tokens. As soon as this thing flips, you will often find yourself swinging in, if not to close the game, to make sure you don't leave the game. But once this is on the battlefield, it is often so hard for your opponent to keep up with it. It will just grind them out. You chump block every turn, you gain life, you set them further back. If you're not chump blocking, it's like another Shieldred. 2 in the air that drains, it's like you're getting double triggers off of this. Got our Farewell, Graveyard Hate again, but also deals with plenty of card types. Virtue of Persistence. This one is a lot like our Cut Down, but it has a little bit of a broader range. It's got this big finisher that's stable to the end of it. And we have Kaya. More card draw, more drain, which is more like just like another Shelly/Invasion. And she does removal. So a fun trick to do that you can do with either of these is to kill your opponent's Atraxa and then take it back. Take it for yourself. Last but not least, we've got our lands. I want to talk about Restless Cottage first. It's a 4/4. It's a really good beater, and although you have to pay to eat the food, it's usually just quick enough to help save you from losing to mono red. And once you get into a good tempo of swinging and eating food, they can't come back from it. Restless Fortress is a 1/4 instead. It becomes a 1/4, and he also drains. Again, so we've kind of put together this late game fallback of being able to drain the opponent out, which is real important. One thing that this is good, aside from not having to pay to gain the life, even though it's susceptible to cut down, the fact that it can close games through a gummed up board really make it worth it. I am convinced that they both have a solid place in the deck. I've won so many games with my opponent having their wide array of blockers, really hoping that they can hold off just long enough to finish me off. I swing at the Restless Fortress like 1 or 2 times and they're done. That's it. Like, it saves you from those scenarios where you're like, crap, I can't get past their blockers. So your opponent is not ever safe just by walling you off. And finally, we have our Myrixes. I've got a love-hate relationship with them. They've won me a lot of games from the Mites, and the Mites also can become a threat to the life total as they get pumped by the Anthems. It fixes your mana early game, but then it screws your mana in the late game. But generally speaking, I feel like I tend to pull through. If you're smart with this and you don't play it too early, you can pay it for green and get your Blossoming Tortoise, and that'll get you more lands, you know? So all in all, a very solid deck. There's so much removal and recursion and token generation and card draw. This deck condenses a lot of value into these cards so that you can answer multiple threats or create multiple kinds of threats and pivot to your opponent's game plan very easily. Games will get close. You might be sitting at literally 1 life and be thinking there's no way in hell that I'm gonna pull out of this. But if you play your cards right, your literal cards, I've done my fair share of bouncing back with all the life gain, all the removal. You can stabilize and then push your opponent too far away to ever hope of closing the game. So, this has been one of the easiest climbs to Mythic I've had. It was a straight shot up to the last tier of Diamond, and then got a little shaky, but stabilized at around 75% win rate, which is really freaking good. So, if you've got comments, like, comment, subscribe. If you've got ideas on how to tweak the deck, maybe we should do the double Laganja thing. I don't know. I haven't tweaked the deck at all since I started my climb with it. It's been that good. If you played it, tell me your experience. Seems to do really good against the meta as a whole. And it rewards if you feel that you are a skilled gamer, you make good decisions. This deck will reward that. That's what I like about it. Thank you so much for sticking around. Again, I will leave a link to the deck list and the video of the gameplay in the description. I'll probably do another video of this to see how it does when the season rotates tomorrow. And I will see you guys in the next one. Happy grinding, good luck getting to Mythic. Goodbye.